Welcome, folks, to the Andy Social Podcast. My name is Andy Dowling, and if we haven't been introduced before, I play bass in the Australian metal band Lord. And if you love a bit of heavy metal, you can go to lord.net.au. We've got a brand new website, thanks to Tim, who's put that all together. So cheers, Timothy. We have streaming music, Spotify playlists, embedded video clips, lots of historical information, our whole back catalogue's there. There's also our online store where you can buy t-shirts, hoodies, patches, CDs, all sorts of stuff's over there. So it's a great way to discover the band and get a taste of what we're all about. So if you go over to lord.net.au, there's plenty of links there to discover our music. In addition to playing in a heavy metal band, I also host the Self-Starter podcast, which is all about small business, self-employment, and freelancing. So depending on your interests and what you're doing, you could be starting your own business, you could have your own business, you could be quite happy in your job, but you just want to earn a little bit of extra money on the side. Whatever it might be, if any of that tickles your pickle, you can go to selfstarter.com.au, or you can search for Self-Starter in your preferred podcast player, maybe that podcast player that you're listening to this through right now, selfstarter.com.au. I interrupt this podcast for a very important announcement for the Antisocial Podcast listeners. Sorry, guys, I've got a heavy metal plug for you guys. Anybody that's interested in going to the upcoming Dragonland tour in September. Dragonland are a power metal band from Sweden, and this is their first ever Australian tour, so pretty cool. I have something very exclusive for you guys. I've got 25 signed laminates. They're going to be signed by the whole band, the whole Dragonland band. And they're made available for anybody that's bought tickets for the upcoming shows. So there's only 25, and the only other people that are going to have these laminates are going to be pretty much band and crew. So that's it. So 25, I'm not going to plug this anywhere else apart from in these episodes. So if you're interested, you can buy, well, first of all, you can buy tickets from stormridertouring.com.au/tickets. And if you haven't got them already, if you do and you want one of these passes, because there's only 25, email Stu from Stormrider Touring, and the email address is stormriderfestival@live.com.au. Give him some proof that you bought the ticket, and he will secure one of those exclusive signed laminates for you guys. If you don't know the dates, the guys are going to be in Australia from the 4th of September to the 8th of September. On the 4th, they're doing an in-store appearance at Utopia Records, just a bit of a meet and greet, so a great way to meet the guys in person and maybe go and have a beer next door at the pub. From the 5th of September, Wednesday the 5th, they're playing the Basement in Canberra. The 6th, they're playing the Ballface Stag in Sydney. The 7th, they're playing Crowbar in Brisbane, and Saturday, the 8th of September, they're playing the Croxton Band Room in Melbourne. And I think that Melbourne show's got like this mammoth lineup. I'm pretty sure Black Majesty, I Fear, Darker Half, Envenomed, and Espionage are playing that as well. So some big bloody heavy metal, melodic metal fest is happening on the 8th of September. So if you're in Melbourne, definitely go to that and check that out. So stormridertouring.com.au/tickets if you haven't got your tickets yet. Email Stu over at stormriderfestival@live.com.au with proof of your purchase, and you'll get one of those laminates if you're in quick enough. Thank you very much, Stu, for the kind donation. How cool is that? I'll get some more of these little goodies and exclusives for you guys in the future as well. This week's shout out. Now, if you're new to the podcast, and I must say that each and every week, I'm getting more and more new listeners that are tuning in for the first time. So for any of you long-time listeners of the podcast, you're just going to have to cop this spiel. But for anybody else, each and every week, I thank somebody that supports me in a range of different ways. And it could be through this podcast, it could be through Self-Starter, it could be through Lord, and it could be ways such as things such as leaving me a review on Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, somewhere on the internet. It could be buying some merchandise through Lord or Andy Social, such as t-shirts or USB passes. I've got Andy Social patches now. Woohoo! CDs, all sorts of stuff. You could be shouting me a beer via the PayPal button over at andysocial.net. It could be some social media love, tagging, retweeting, sharing, liking, love hearting, all that sort of rubbish. It could be a message of encouragement. It could be a guest suggestion as well. Whatever it might be, small or big, it all helps me. It keeps me motivated, keeps me inspired. It means a hell of a lot to me. So thank you so much for people that continue to do this for me. But each and every week, I thank one person. I highlight them, put them on public record, and just thank them for their support. This week's shout out is for Liam Anthony, old mate, Liam from Brisbane. I've known Liam for so many years, and Liam's such a good guy. And Liam has donated a pile of Elkinwood CDs for upcoming giveaways for the Andy Social podcast. Now, if you haven't heard of Elkinwood are a progressive black folk metal band. And if you want to check out their music, you can go to elkinwood.bandcamp.com. You can search for Elkinwood on Facebook as well. That is ELKENWOOD. So thank you so much, Liam. Please send me a message. I will hook you up with something something that's lying around the house. I'll have something fun, something cool, and I'll shoot that out to you in the post because we all love getting something in the mail. This week's episode is with Mark Briody of Jag Panzer. Fuck yes. I'm a huge Jag Panzer fan. I got into the band through the Thane to the Throne album, which came out in the year 2000, I believe, which is, man, that's like, that's 2 decades ago, or almost 18 years ago. Oh, man, time rolls on, hey? Anyway, far out. That knocked me for 6. Anyway, I've known Mark for almost as long, and I've known him from my early days as a wee young lad trolling internets, primarily on the metalrules.com forums. And I know there's a few of you guys that listen to this podcast that are from those good old forum days as well. So here's a trip down memory lane, folks. But look, I'm a big fan of Jag Panzer, have been for many years, and I'm a big Mark fan. The one thing that I really love about Mark is the way that he interacts with people online. He's one of the most approachable, personable guys. He's always interacting and he's building relationships with people all over the world all the time. And I've certainly taken pages out of his book with the way that I interact with people from a musician's point of view of being in a band online, because I think it's just really, really important, especially in the last, decade or so with the big transition into the digital world and where a lot of bands have been left behind. I think Mark's just really embraced the communication aspect of it, and I think it's really lended to Jag Panzer's continued success after all of these years as well. But what you'll see, or what you'll hear in this episode, I should say, is that those qualities of Mark have not just surfaced in the recent years. This stems back from day dot, from him being in a band and doing a lot of tape trading back in the day. And for anybody that's been listening to this podcast for a while, with some of the particular guests I've had on, we have touched on tape trading in the past, but I haven't really dug into it too much. I've sort of just brushed over the concept because I am a little bit younger, and I only really did a little bit of tape trading at one point where I was exchanging like bootleg VHS and cassettes with other people around Australia and overseas. So I had a few like random, like, I don't know, it must have been like Metallica and Slayer and Pantera bootleg stuff, which I don't even own anymore. So I had a little bit of a grasp of a concept of what that tape trading era may have been. But in this conversation, when Mark brought it up, I really dug into it a bit, and we got talking for quite some time about tape trading and what it was all about and what it was like for him embracing it and getting into it, and just how different it is to these days. I think for a lot of us, we take for granted how easy it is to connect with people. But, decades ago with tape trading, you posted things out and you waited for responses. And it was very much a pen pal type relationship with people. But the really cool thing about this is that it really helped Jag Panzer in those early years, because Mark had this network of people, metal fans, that loved the same type of music all over the world. And so when it came time for Jag Panzer to release music, he had a network of people there ready to go to help him. So a really, really cool story. We talk about the early era of the band, a lot of different stages along the way. We talk about more recent times as well. It's just a really great chat. Some really, really, really cool stories from Mark. He's such a nice guy, and it was so great to get him on the podcast finally. And also, I must say, if you want to check out their latest album, The Deviant Chord, you can do so. I'm sure you can find it from most sort of metal online retailers. But if need be, you can go to jagpanzer.com and follow the links there. You can find Jag Panzer on Facebook. They're also on Twitter. I don't think they're on Instagram. I could be wrong. But nonetheless, you can go to the show notes over at andysocial.net. I'll have all the links to Jag Panzer and how you can buy the Deviant Chord and everything else. I've got some pictures and videos and everything over there, as always, with all of the episodes on the Andy-Social podcast. So you can go over there and check it out. But really, really stoked for this episode. Really enjoyed chatting with Mark. Such a cool guy, and I really think you guys will enjoy it as well. So enough of me. Please enjoy this episode with Mark Briody and Jag Panzer.
I had uncovered a deathly allergy to Brazil nuts. Other than that, I'm pretty healthy.
Oh, maybe that's what I saw, because I thought, was it?
Yeah, that was kind of scary. Yeah, I can't eat those nuts; it'll kill me. Well, I carry an EpiPen now, so I guess that would save my life.
Oh, sometimes you find out the hard way.
Yeah.
So later next month, you're going over to Germany to do Bang Your Head. And before that, you're doing a bunch of US shows. Has it been a while since you've done US shows?
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did some in 2016. We did, let's see, no, we did San Diego last year. Yeah, and the year before we did Chicago and Brooklyn. So definitely not a lot of shows, but they were a lot of fun. A lot of people came out, and we had a good time. I wish we could do a lot more shows.
Has as well on that last note, that last thing that you said, has touring changed quite a bit over the years?
Yeah, it's back in the day on Century Media, they would set up we were doing 5 6 weeks on the road, and they would subsidize it, and it was great. But those days are gone. So now, with every show we get asked to do, we have to look, is this financially possible? We make almost no money from the band, so for us to go out and play, it has to at least break even. We can't lose money going out, because that would come out of my personal pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the shows that you're doing in a couple of weeks' time, they're all sort of bunched together as well. So I'm assuming that you're trying to offset as much as you can between that run of shows.
Yeah, that's what I'm told. I actually don't have anything to do with the live gigs. I have everything to do with the songwriting and recording and doing everything like that. But I try to stay out of the gigs. I just don't have the time to even have anything to do with it. So I just pretty much go where they tell me to go.
That's a different type of headache to have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've done it before, and it's a nightmare. It's a lot of coordinating and just a lot of things going on. I'm happy to not do it.
And do you guys have, as it stands now, is everything DIY as far as, is it someone else in the band that's sort of taking care of a lot of that stuff, or do you still have management that you lean on?
Actually, it's the first time we got management was last year.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, we've always done everything ourselves. Yeah, and we would divide the tasks up. You're going to have to take care of this. You're going to have to take care of this. I've always sort of handled the doing the recording, booking recording sessions, recording budgets. But even that's gotten way complicated nowadays, because with our current record deal, we have to provide production ready everything, album artwork, photos. So, that's me tracking down someone to, not only an artist, we lucked out, we found a great artist with Tucson, but, I have to track somebody down to do the layout, and I have to deal with the budgets and delivery times. And so, yeah, just dealing with the album recordings is a ridiculous amount of work for probably 2 cents an hour. And I'm not even joking with that amount.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we're in our band, we've been fairly lucky over the years because, Tim in our band's been pretty deep into home recordings, and over the years he's built up his experience, and so now he's got his own studio and we do everything ourselves. But it's the same sort of thing where the amount of energy that you put into it and the time versus what you get back financially, it's very little. So you've got to keep telling yourself it's for the love of it all.
Yeah, yeah, you really have to love doing it, and I just love playing heavy metal, man. It never gets old, and it's always exciting every time I get on stage with the guys. It's great. It's like being a kid again. So I do love it.
And definitely with, I mean, metal being pretty unique as far as a type of music where there's such a deep connection with people. I think for you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a big part of your fan base and a really sort of long-term loyalty has come from a lot of German fans.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot in Germany, Greece too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so to a certain extent, the U.S. Not so much in Japan and that area though.
Yeah, because I mean, I've always seen Japan's interesting. I'll touch on that really quickly because I know quite a few bands that have had a lot of success over the years and had some really good label coverage, and just have not even managed to drop anything in Japan. Japan just hasn't blinked whatsoever, and it's just really unique, and it's such a unique and segregated market to everywhere else. It's just it's almost like you have to know someone. It's really, really hard to penetrate there.
Yeah, I've never done a single interview in Japan ever for any reason. Um, the amount of email I've received from Japan is probably 4 emails in 20 years.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you some reassurance. Well, kind of reassurance. I was over there a few weeks ago, and I was in Tokyo, and I did find a Jag Panzer CD on a shelf in a CD store. So
Wow.
there is a tiny little bit of presence over there, I guess. I did see one CD.
Yeah, I mean, I see videos, and and other bands like the guys in Halloween were telling me about playing Japan, and I mean, by all accounts, it's just amazing to play there, and the culture is fascinating. I'm just continually disappointed that we just can't make any inroads there.
It's really hard because we're going through a pretty tough period at the moment because we let go of our last label a few years ago, and a lot of our main contacts have sort of just dried up for various reasons. And so now we're writing, well, we finished writing the new album and we've started the recording process. And so we're getting to that point now where we've got to start thinking about, well, how do we shop this and look for new opportunities? And we've got to almost start from scratch in Japan again. So we've got to try and find some new contacts and really build relationships. And it's I think it's changing a bit because it's a lot more westernized than it used to be, but it's such a sensitive market. The relationships mean almost more than the music itself, and you really have to cultivate that and make sure that they feel that you're really giving them time and really sort of nurturing that relationship. And it can be a really exhausting thing because I think in the Western world we're so much more transactional and we move quickly and we try to get to the point and we move on to the next thing, but there's a perception in Japan where there's just such a really sort of deep relationship and connection that you have with people. Because for us, you miss 1 year of going over there and then you feel like you've really sort of lost your momentum big time. It's almost like they take it personally that you haven't come back, and there's logical reasons why you can't always get back there every year, but it's just such a unique market. So I'm not surprised when a lot of really successful bands over the years, or bands that have had a lot of exposure in a lot of other markets, just don't get a look in whatsoever there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wish you guys best of luck there. I hope you can make it work out. I'm definitely jealous.
Well, I'll keep you posted because I mean, even there's a lot. The thing with a lot of that, and you mentioned it before with the interviews. We've never done an interview abroad. We never get contacted, so we never get any email requests to do interviews or anything, over the phone or anything like that. But when you go over there and you play, then you get bombarded. So your afternoons are just filled with sitting down with people and going through that process of doing interviews. But you never do it any other time unless you're over there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's really, really hard. And I think maybe it's changing a bit because I guess, as I said before, I think they're getting a little bit more westernized and the language barrier isn't as bad as what it used to be. But I think there's a little bit of a hesitation to do things remotely because of the language gap. And I think now they've got a little bit more confidence. So I'll keep you posted with how that journey goes because I think it's going to be a very different experience to what we've done in the past.
Well, excellent. Yeah, I wish you luck.
Oh, thank you very much. Going back to some of the other countries and markets that you guys have had some success in, and I've always seen Germany because I think you guys have done a few different types of festivals over there, but I'm always fascinated with metal because it can be so niched and so broad at the same time. And from the outside looking in, you guys have seemed to really sort of capture this niche audience of a lot of old school heavy metal, the traditional heavy metal crowd in especially Germany, that bang your head crowd. And I think you guys have done Keep It True in the past as well. Yeah,
several times. Yeah, that's a fantastic festival. I love Keep It.
Yeah, and that festival in itself is so unique in the sense that it's so niched down, as you guys in the States would say, and but it's the dedication and the loyalty is just incredible. I mean, those guys are diehards for their music. And have you guys? I mean, you guys would have a straight, an immediate connection with the Germans in regard to how passionate these guys are about sort of a lot of traditional and especially US power metal as well.
Yeah, it's a huge connection for me personally because Germany and, in Greece. And there's a few places where I meet fans that have the exact same feeling towards heavy metal that I do. I mean, if we're at a festival and we're not playing, I'm out in front watching the show because I really, really want to see the other bands. And I want to hear other live bands. I just want to experience it all just the way. And so I have a lot in common with the fans in metal fans in Germany or Greece for the same way, because, a lot of shows in the US, you tend to have, it's not so much underground metal, but more in the more mainstream shows in the US, you tend to have people just show up for the headliner or show up for one band. A lot of people don't want to sit through 5 bands, which I was never like that. I want to see everybody. I want to see the whole thing. And so I really feel at home at a festival like Keep It True or Bang Your Head, because I can see all these bands along with fellow metal fans, and there's sort of a camaraderie there. It's very cool.
It's one of those things, and I'm sure you can agree, touring for so many years, that you can go to different places around the world and reconnect with people, and then you connect with new people as well because you've got a common interest. But it's amazing how those connections just stick, and you can go to various places on the other side of the world and just pick up where you left off.
Yeah, and it's also great getting to know some of these people. A lot of these people have fascinating lives. They just have completely unique occupations, or they just come from a part of the world I've never been to, or it's just great to just connect with these people on so many different levels.
And do you have a segment of people that have just been there since almost day dot? Yeah,
there's actually quite a bit of them. A lot of people come and go. Every time we come out with a new album, it always disappoints somebody. It's like, oh, and I know that. But then you see the people back after a while. It's like, oh, okay, I'm cool. I know what you're doing now. Or I like the record now. So we just kind of laugh it off. But yeah, there's a few people that they're always behind us and always at the gigs. And that is, I really treasure that. That is very cool. But then there's a much bigger selection of people that, they come and go, and that's fine. I appreciate anybody that listens to us or comes out and sees us.
We've got a bit of a concept with the band, because I guess we've never had, well, not for quite a few years, we've never had sort of a really sort of large scale distribution of our releases. We've done a lot of stuff DIY, and we'll export ourselves, and so we'll build those connections with independent music distributors and try and send a bunch of wholesale discs out to people and do it the hard way. And it's your fan base is sort of dictated on your distribution sometimes, and so for us, we've always sort of thought, well, what's our inner circle? And you sort of look and you start, it almost gets to a point where you write out a list of names of these people that have just been there since day dot. Every time you put something up online or you sell something, you get an order straight away. They're the first people to share your things around. They're the first people to tell you how awesome, the new music is or whatever it is. And so you've got it's this extension of the band where you've got the 5th or the 6th member, or depending on how many people are in the band. And it's sort of like, if you can make them happy, it's almost like that's your, I don't know, it's your organic street team, it's your organic marketing team, and they sort of go out and do a lot of that hard work for you. And I've seen, just knowing you for a few years now online and seeing a lot of the way that you interact with people on forums and on social media, you've got, I mean, you could be looking at this from a completely different angle than I am, but you have such a direct connection with people and you interact with them very consistently all the time, and it's not like a separation. It's just it's everyone's on the same page, and I think from the outside looking in, it looks like you've really embraced a lot of people that feel passionate about you and your music.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. You know what? I try to treat people the way I always wanted to be treated as a metal fan. I mean, I've been going to metal gigs. I had a fake ID as a teenager so I could get into metal shows. So I've been going since I was a kid. And people that made a big impact on me were guys like Lemmy, because Lemmy just saw you as another guy. It wasn't like he's the rock star, you're the fan. And unfortunately, many other bands see it like that. They're the star. They're going to make your day by speaking to you for 30 seconds. And Lemmy was never like that. I didn't know Lemmy, but I ran into him all the time, and he would recognize me, but it's not like we were friends or anything. But, I had met him when I was a kid, and he just treated me like another music fan. I talked to him about gear and beer, and I went looking at fake merchandise with him in Mexico once.
Oh, wow.
And it was such a great experience for me, just to have someone on an equal level. So I've always vowed when I'm interacting with people online, just to treat everybody like they're a fellow heavy metal fan. That's it. I don't care how old they are or how young they are, or even if they like Jag Panzer. I mean, I'll talk to anybody about metal because it's in my blood. So I make it a point really to try to treat people well. I
think it definitely shows, and obviously it's a natural thing for you to do. So I mean, that's why you do it. But I think a lot of people notice that, and I think that's maybe it's not as unique these days now as we become more and more connected online and people get used to using social media, and it's the mystery of the big amazing band, the rock star sort of mentality sort of dilutes a bit. It probably won't be as unique, and a lot more people will embrace it. But I've certainly seen it over the years and seen the way that you interact, and I've taken a page from the way that you do it, because I think I think it goes a long way to building really good relationships with people, and just building respect back and forth between people. I think it's a great human quality to have.
Oh, thank you. Once again, I keep saying thank. Over the years, I've had people tell me to quit doing that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that's sad when I hear it, because I know what they mean, but that's just not me. I've had people say, you've got to act more like a rock star, and I'm not a rock star. I don't even know how I'm not going to act like that. Yeah, I've had people suggest to me, people in the music industry said, you've got to be more distant. You've got to be aloof. You've got to be the guy on the pedestal, and that is so not me. Absolutely not. So I could never do that. That's just completely out of my wheelhouse.
Well, I think with metal, it makes more sense to be so connected with people. I think, putting aside, what people should do as far as, basic decent human qualities of talking and interacting and respecting one another, metal's got that thing where there is an element of that grassroots approach where people just connect and get along, and we find common ground and common interests very quickly. And I think it's not so foreign for metal musicians and fans and music fans to connect like that. So it's not that out there. But I think when you start to get into, it's different now, but I'm sure years ago, with a lot of sort of more your glitzy hard rock and your big sort of arena bands and whatnot, it would make more sense, I guess, in a particular way to be distant and be mysterious and project a certain image where people, it's lofty and people can't directly relate to it.
Yeah, and I experienced that a lot in the 80s, where I would go see bands and try to talk to somebody and just be completely shunned. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the experience. I went to see Rat once, and I wasn't a big fan of their music. Loved their guitar playing though. Two Martini's great, and they wouldn't give me the time of day, but what it is, not trying to get down on Rat here, but it was like that with a lot of bands. And it was unfortunate to me. I always liked the personal connection.
Well, that might be a good segue, because I was going to ask you about, and I think I've got this right, in sort of the mid to late 80s, you guys for a brief period of time relocated to Southern California.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll get to that in a moment, but you said something before, and I'll kick myself if I don't dig into this a little bit deeper, but you went searching for fake merchandise with Lemmy in Mexico?
Yeah, we were playing in Mexico, and I always try to notice, what merch sells for, who's selling it, what's going on. I always try to keep an eye on the business, and we were playing the Monterey Metal Festival, and I was very puzzled how almost no merchandise was being sold. And I was standing there looking around, and I'm peering outside, and I see people selling bootleg merchandise.
Yeah.
And then Lemmy taps me on my shoulder and says, "Hey, mate, I'm not even going to try his accent." He said, "I'm going to go check it out. You want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then one of the guys from the festival said, "Look, you can go out there and look. Please don't try to cause any trouble. You're not. It's not going to turn out well for you guys." And Lemmy said, "That's cool." I think he was obviously talking to Lemmy. Jag Panzer merchandise was probably 1/100th of Motorhead's there. So yeah, I went out with Lemmy, and he was very nice to the people. He wanted to see what they were producing, what the quality was. So we went to a few different vendors, and we were looking at the merch, and I bought a Jag Panzer hat and an embroidered Jag Panzer shirt for like ridiculously cheap, and they're pretty cool. I still have them.
That's a surreal moment. I mean, obviously, just sort of walking around looking at bootleg merchandise with Lemmy's one thing, but to stand there and go and purchase, what is your own band's merchandise, but unofficial, is a pretty surreal moment.
Yeah, and it was funny because the people selling it had no idea who were or who the bands were, anything. They were just selling a product, and I had a good interaction with them and paid them and got my hat and shirt.
That's crazy. So yeah, going back, and you mentioned before about Rat, and I guess the question is with at that period of time when you guys temporarily relocated to Southern California, was that sort of a big feeling that you did get when you were in California with that disconnect and with a lot of bands? Because I'm stereotyping quite a bit here or generalizing, but a lot of those types of bands came from that area, that scene.
It was it was terrible for us out there. I mean, we met Joey DeFoy, so in that respect, that was very good because he was a great player and been a huge contributor to the band. But otherwise, I had no idea the music business worked like that. At that time in LA, all the bigger bands all had so much money behind them, huge walls of Marshall stacks, big banners, road crews. We've never had a road crew ever. Sometimes there's one on a tour, but I'm usually, hauling my own gear around. So that whole thing was so bizarre for us to see how it worked there. And, we all grew up in absolutely the poorest part of town. So we didn't have money for walls of stacks and stage shows or anything like that. And, we found that out in LA that all the bands that we thought were sort of on our level, kind of like Armored Saint, no, they were way, way above it because they had, were able to put on a full stage show, were able to put ads in magazines. So, we really got nothing done out there. It was actually very depressing.
And was it, I mean, obviously there's a financial aspect to it all, but was there also a different attitude there compared to where you guys had grown up and sort of developed the band?
Yeah, entirely different attitude. The attitude in Colorado at the time was everybody plays originals. I mean, I'm sorry, I got completely backwards. Everybody plays covers because we used to play covers when we were in high school. If you're going to play originals, you better be really good. And that means really practicing. We used to practice all the time. We once went a year and a half and we practiced every day, Christmas, every day. That was sort of the thing in Colorado was these songs better be great and you better be good players. And it wasn't like that in LA. There certainly were lots of great players, but really a lot of the focus out there was how big is your stage show, how you have pyro, how dynamic is the presentation. And that was pretty much, that didn't mean much at all in Colorado, whereas that was huge out there. So that was a big shock to us.
And did you guys, I mean, when you guys relocated out there, did you just all sort of bundle together and get like a place to share to live for that period of time? Or how did that all work, I guess, logistically?
Yeah, we all lived in a house, and we quickly learned, we didn't know anything about the music business. We quickly learned that there's no money coming in. So we all started to find work, and only a few of us found jobs. So we ended up just coming back to Colorado after about 5 months.
And going, I mean, getting back home, did you feel that, I guess, was it a case of having the tail between your legs, or did you sort of, I mean, obviously you said before it wasn't a great experience, but did you take a lot out of that experience, to, I guess, motivate you guys to take it on from a different angle? Or how did you guys interpret the experience in hindsight?
Yeah, I was mad, actually. I knew we could never compete on the financial level of some of these bands. We couldn't. I mean, we just couldn't have a wall of Marshalls. It wasn't going to happen. So we went back to Colorado and said, okay, we got to try to make our music better. We got to try to and that led to the writing of Ample Destruction. We thought that was our only hope. That's what I thought. We're not going to outspend these bands, so we have to try to be better. So yeah, it most certainly motivated me. This band has failures all the time. I mean, it's always, so I try to take motivation out of every one of them. It can get very tough at times, but I love the music, so I pull through.
And I mean, speaking to a lot of guys that were putting out albums in the 80s and trying to network and try and get their name out there, I mean, it's a completely different world to what it is now, where you can within 10 seconds I can click a couple of buttons and connect with anybody on the planet. But a few decades ago, it was a completely different story. And so when you guys got back and you're trying to, you're fueled by anger, what were the steps to sort of, get those connections and sort of worked for that release? I mean, obviously tape trading and things like that were a big thing to get awareness of bands and music. But I mean, what sort of things did you have to do to sort of make sure that you guys got a look in, got an opportunity?
Well, I think we really lucked out because my appetite for underground metal was just insatiable. I mean, I just had to hear new bands all the time. So I became an avid tape trader, not to promote Jag Panzer, but to hear other bands. I was getting cassette tapes with Sortilege and Ostrogoth and bands like that. And I was going, man, this music's fantastic. I got to get more. So I became a huge tape trader. I was dubbing tapes every day, making a trip to the post office every Saturday with a huge stack for around the world. So that certainly helped promote Jag Panzer. Even though I didn't really promote Jag Panzer maybe I'd throw a song on there. I didn't put flyers in there or anything in the packages saying, listen to my band. For me, it honestly, what I got out of tape trading was hearing the other bands. I did it as a metal fan. So eventually through tape trading, I heard about a lot of different magazines. So I would just sit down and write letters to every metal magazine. I didn't care how big they were. If it was one guy doing a metal magazine from a copy machine, he got a letter from me and a tape. Or if you're the biggest, huge metal magazine, like, Kerrang was pretty much one of the world's biggest, they got a letter and a tape from me also. So I was, for a while, I was doing it every single day. Every day I was trying to hunt down new fanzines or just anybody to promote the band to, and it helped.
That your local post office must have known you so well.
Oh, they actually did. Yeah, they knew me. Hey, Mark. So they were very cool, because in the early days it got complicated sending international packages. And I was just a kid. I didn't know anything about the customs forms, so they were great. So I actually had a good relationship with the local post office.
And I mean, going back to the tape trading thing, and not sort of really actively, I guess what we would say now is spamming, but promoting the band at the time and including a lot of Jag Panzer music. Was there a certain type of etiquette or an unspoken law when it came to tape trading, like things that you do and things that you don't do?
Well, what I did, which, I don't want to say it's the etiquette for everybody. What I felt was the etiquette was I would never give more Jag Panzer songs than any other band.
Okay. Yeah.
If I got a tape and it had 2 songs from, like if I got a tape of Swedish metal and it's got Oz and Overdrive on there and they each had a couple songs, I would throw in a couple Jag Panzer songs and a couple Warlord songs and maybe a couple Malice songs in my return tape of US metal. So, to me, that was the etiquette is to never give more Jag Panzer than what was sort of being presented in that conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, definitely. I was just, when you made the comment about, not putting a lot of music in there, I thought, I wonder if there was some unspoken laws around tape trading back in the day where, someone might frown upon somebody that's just loading up a cassette full of their own music.
Yeah, people did do it, and it was certainly frowned upon. I just remember getting a few emails saying, I got a tape from that one band, why don't they practice more instead of sending out tapes to everybody. And so, people definitely did notice when someone was seen to be doing this live spamming.
Definitely. And I mean, how do you sort of, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this, but the whole tape trading thing, because you just don't have like a directory of such to find these people. How do you build this network of people where you start sending tapes to different people? Where does the first address come from? Is it out of magazines? Is there like a classified in
right.
metal magazines?
Yeah. It's out of magazines. A lot of the fanzines back then had sort of a pen pal section. And pretty soon you start recognizing names, like KJ Doughton, huge instrumental in Metallica's success. First saw his name on a tape trader list, and then I saw his name writing some articles, and I thought, okay, this is, he's well connected in the metal underground, and him and I had, we have a very good friendship over the years. So you keep building relationships like that. For a while I would write to everybody on the pen pal list. And, it was always just a letter first, just introducing myself, seeing if they're interested in tape trading. And it was usually about 1 in 4 people would want to trade tapes. I think at the height, I probably had about 300 people on my trading list.
Wow. Incredible. It's such a patient game as well, isn't it? Because, you've got to wait for people to respond, and before they say yes, and then then sending the tapes back and forth, and then to have 300 people, I guess eventually you just got a steady stream of tapes coming in and going out all the time. But there's definitely a level of patience there.
Thankfully, it was never all 300 at one time.
No.
It was a lot though, and back then it was real. The tape had to run real time.
Yeah.
To do copy, I just hooked up 2 cassette decks, cleaned the heads. And just ran tapes all while I was practicing. I would often spend hours and hours in the evening just running tapes.
Oh, well, that would have kept you out of trouble.
And then I'd get my mom's typewriter and I typed up all the labels.
Oh, I love it. I never sort of got to experience a lot of that, but I did come in on the end of a little bit of pen pal stuff where you sort of connect with people just before email started to kick in. So, but I loved getting something in the mail, which we don't often get these days, and being able to sort of connect with, I was attempting to handwrite letters, which were probably embarrassingly, hard to read. But there's something really special about having that sort of connection with people that's that involves time and distance and having to wait for a response and being really thoughtful about what you write and what you give them. Even with your choice of songs that you send back, you have to sort of really be intentional about what you put together, because it's not something that you can quickly change. It's going to take some time, so you got to make sure you're on the money.
Oh yeah, because the quality of your mixtape, that was a big deal. If I'm sending somebody, a couple Merciful Fate tracks, I got to pick the right ones. If people noticed, if somebody would have sent a tape and it was always the song 1 and 2 from an album, I mean, yeah, so you really had to, and I liked doing it. I liked picking which Warlord songs I want to send somebody. And it was cool. After you respond with somebody for a while, you kind of learned their taste. So then you started thinking, hey, what would this guy like? And then it was completely custom mixtapes for each person you talk to. And that became really fun.
I mean, you mentioned one of the guys before, but do you still keep in contact with any of these guys that you were tape trading with back in the 80s?
Yeah, I think there's probably about 10 of them on Facebook.
Yeah.
And it's cool. Yeah. Everybody remembers back in the day.
That's cool. And when Jag Panzer started to do some tours and release music, did you start to see any sort of reaction from people that you'd built relationships with from the tape trading? Like suddenly you're getting acknowledgement from those guys that you'd built those connections with?
I think most of the tape trading people said it's about time everyone else caught up to listening to your band. Yeah, most of my tape trader friends they became Jag Panzer fans, which was really cool. I appreciated that. But then they were some of the first. So they would always joke about it's about time these other people are catching on.
And it's good, isn't it? Because I mean, you're doing it for different reasons. You were doing it for the love of music and connecting with people and sending things backwards and forwards and showing people different bands and different songs. But on the side, and maybe indirectly, you were cultivating and building this fan base for the future that you had this immediate loyalty from people because you had that personal connection with so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it was interesting how you could build up a relationship with somebody just over mail. You just sort of got a sense of their personality, and it's funny meeting some of these people on tour years later. They really were like what I thought they were. I had a vision in my mind from tape trading and reading their letters, and people were very cool in person. They are exactly what I thought they would be.
And do you still have a lot of those letters?
I probably lost about 90% of them. We had a flood here. We've had fires and floods here. We had a flood here about 12 years ago, and I just had such limited time to get things out of the water. And unfortunately, I didn't grab my biggest box of letters. And I also lost my biggest box of fanzines.
Oh, wow. Well, at least you still got your memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit, I did read somewhere, and I was trying to find it this week because I wrote a bunch of notes earlier in the year when I was hoping to speak to you, and time got away from us. But and I was going back through the notes, and I saw this thing that I wrote down. I thought, okay, where is it? I'm trying to find it online. But can you tell me about the Chuck Berry story?
Yeah, I was. We had a local sound crew here in town, sound company. They did light and sound. They were called ESP. Just great company. I mean, great equipment, knowledgeable guys who knew everything about live sound. And I used to just go in there as a kid, like 15, so I'd ride my bike down there and just to look around. And they were really cool. And I asked a lot of questions, and they said, hey, you want to work for us? We can't pay, and you're going to be moving gear. I mean, that's your main job. You're going to move gear. You're also going to be a gopher if the artist needs an errand run. We're going to have switch. You're going to string cables. You might play some mics. And I said, absolutely, I would love to do it. So I worked about every show with them. I wasn't on the payrolls. I wasn't technically an employee, but I was there all the time. So you got to meet all these musicians, and some were great. Some were horrible. I mean, some were just some of the worst people, but some were great. Chuck Berry was awesome. I mean, I loved Chuck Berry when I was a kid, and he walked in, he just traveled by himself. He was in a station wagon. And so we got a local band. He walks in with his guitar and amp, and I said, welcome to Colorado, Mr. Berry. He said, Mr. Berry, I like that, son. And he smiled. It was cool. And I was watching him get his guitar out of his case, and he said, you can get closer, you can take a look, and he showed me his guitar, and I asked him how he warmed up. And he was just a great guy. Just really answered all my questions and was really cool. Helped him load up afterwards. He's very appreciative of the help. He was, it was just absolutely wonderful experience working with Chuck Berry.
Now, I was blown away when I think it must have been a written interview that I saw online, because he mentioned this story, and I was blown away with somebody of his stature, in music, somebody that's just this larger than life personality, and to see him doing it on such a DIY level and embracing that, and the way that he interacts is just incredible. And I think that just sort of feeds into what we were saying before about, how you interact with people that love your music and being on the same level as them. I think it's just so cool to see people that you just, I don't know, I would never have ever expected to hear that kind of story.
Yeah, it was funny. I was asking him questions about the music business, and the place he played was a smaller place, but it was packed. I mean, he could have played a bigger venue and drew a bigger crowd, but he told me with things like, because I asked him about that, and he said, son, with things like this, it's about the business side of it. It's about, how I can work my touring schedule, how much money I can make, because he says it's a business to me. So, I started to understand, maybe, the do-it-yourself, just getting a band in each city, that worked well from a business point of view for Chuck. It was a business model that worked well for him. So that was a good education for me.
Yeah, it blows my mind that I would never have picked Chuck Berry to be like that. That's just incredibly cool. Okay, shifting gears again. So you put out the last album last year, so it hasn't been out for too long. So we're probably jumping the gun a bit. But have you guys been writing for a next album? Have you got sort of sights set on a next album, or you more in sort of a touring mode at the moment and letting the album get a bit of airtime in the at the moment?
Yeah, I haven't started writing anything yet. I need to. I always have to be motivated to write, and a record company telling me you need to write a new album does not work for me at all. I always have to absolutely just have to feel the need to write, and I've done so much press for this album over the year. I mean, just a ton, and then just individually conversing with people and back and forth, that I'm in more of the promotion mode for it, and not really in the songwriting mode. I mean, I've been songwriting for years, so I think I could pick up my guitar and write something, but I don't like to do it that way. It's got to come from the heart. It's got to be a natural expression for me, which is good and bad. I mean, it makes me feel good. I get the occasional email from somebody that doesn't like it, that somebody says, you need to do an album every year and you need to do Ample Destruction too.
I bet you heard that a few times.
Yeah. I write what I write, whatever I'm moved to write at the time, when I'm motivated to write, that's what I do. And I'm just not in the writing mode right now.
No, definitely. And, the last album was through SPV.
Yes.
So is that going to be an ongoing relationship with them for the foreseeable future?
I think we're done. We finished our contract, and there was another option. And actually, I think the last album was the option. How embarrassing that I don't know this stuff. I think we're done with SPV, but I can't say that for sure.
Yeah, no worries. And I think, as you said, like if you're not even in writing mode yet, then well, that's a think about later thing to worry about.
Yeah.
One thing that you touched on really early in the conversation, and about the last album, The Deviant Chord, you were talking about having to source a lot of things yourself, and the label pretty much requesting almost the final product. So a lot of it goes back into the band's hands to create everything. And you mentioned the artwork as well, and sourcing an artist to do the cover. And this has been an ongoing challenge for us in our band, and trying to work out who to work with and searching for people. And I'm curious, with what you've done and for the last album and sourcing the artists for the Deviant Chord, what were you looking for and how did you search for artists? I mean, what was the approach that you took, or what did you have in mind, or what was the type of conversation that you were having with people to see if you could find the right person for whatever your vision was?
Well, the first thing I look for is a certain level of technical skill. I don't go, you don't have to be the greatest artist in the world, but you have to hit a certain level of technical skill. And then from then on, it's all passion. I want to see passion in the art. I don't want to, because I can look at art, especially in the fantasy genre sometimes, and I get the impression, right or wrong, that the guy painted it to pay his rent that month. Which is fine. I don't begrudge anybody trying to make money on art, but I just, for Jag Panzer stuff, I know the passion that we put into writing and playing, so I want artwork that's got a passion to it. So I actually looked for artists for a couple years. I started going to, I always go to Comic-Con. I went to Comic-Con Denver, my local Comic-Con, which is considered small, but I think it gets about 10,000 people. And they would have lots of artists there, and it was so disappointing of how much bad attitude I ran into there. I would always find about 5 artists a day. I'm like, yeah, that looks good. And I would talk to the guy, and and you would hear, no, I'm not interested in, I don't work for bands. And, even before I had a chance to say, I'm not asking for anything for free, I will gladly pay you for your work. So, yeah, and that was happening all the time. We're dealing with Comic-Con. It was so frustrating because there was a lot of great artists there, and I wasn't even getting one that was interested. So, I was pretty down on the whole thing of finding an artist. I knew I had to keep doing it. So I was doing these nightly searches every night for fantasy art, and it was just, no, talk to that guy, no, talk to that guy. And then one day I see this fortune teller painting. I'm like, wow, that's good. Wow. And the artist was Dusan Markovic from Serbia. So I Googled him, and I found a bunch more of his artwork, and all of it was great. I mean, it wasn't like he had one great painting there and then a couple ones that aren't as good. I mean, they were all great. And I could see the passion, not only the passion, but his just skill level was through the roof. I thought, this guy's so good, he's probably a total ass. He's probably like, and I was going, on one hand, I probably couldn't blame him because he's really that good. I absolutely loved his art. And I wrote him, and he was a great guy. He's great. We were totally on the same page with what we wanted, what he wanted to paint for art, what I wanted to see. His budget was absolutely reasonable because I have no problem paying people for their work. I think artists should be paid, but we have a very, very tiny budget. And he was able to work with us, and he just delivered some great art. He delivered it on time, and he was absolute professional to work with. So it was a wonderful experience working with him.
It's oh man, listening to you sort of go through that process of trying to find people and searching. I mean, it's certainly something that we've done all the time. And you try to talk to people and approach people, and I guess from an artist's perspective, they probably get hassled so often by so many different people, and they probably see so many time wasters as well that they get so jaded and bitter that when somebody legitimate actually comes along, it's difficult to sort of separate the good from the bad. And I mean, we had so many troubles over the years, and then we'd cease working with somebody, then we'd think, okay, who are we going to find now? And then you have to try and express and explain what's in your head to somebody who can visually create it, and it's it can be a bit of a nightmare to try and manage. But I saw a couple of comments about, and what you said earlier in the chat about you having to actively sort of source and really search for somebody that was going to meet what your expectations were. And it's something that I see a lot of bands these days sort of fall into the complacent sort of autopilot mode of just churning out really subpar artwork,
Yeah.
where it becomes, oh well, that's the last thing on the list of things to do before you release the album, and I'll just slap a bit of Photoshop together and just put out this piece of crap, and the music
Yeah.
could be fantastic, but the artwork, unfortunately, the book does get judged from the cover, and
Yeah.
that's part of, and it's got to create a visual as well as the sound. And so many bands let themselves down because they just do not put the time into their visual aspect.
Oh, I'll tell you an interesting story about art. This was one of I've had several rough lessons in the music business, and we were doing Thing to the Throne, looking for an artist, and my absolute favorite artist at the time was Keith Parkinson. He had done various book covers, and the guy was great. I wrote his management or agent, and it got shot down immediately. Keith doesn't do metal covers. He doesn't do any album covers. No, he's a businessman. He's booked way in advance. And, I understood. He's a world-class fantasy artist. But I wrote another email. I just outlined the project, and I didn't expect to hear back. And then Keith Parkinson called me himself on the phone.
Wow.
And said, hey, I liked your letter, and I went out and listened to your band. And I'm not really a metal guy, but I like this. And he said, you're doing a Macbeth theme album cover. I've always wanted to paint a scene for Macbeth. And if I can get paid to do it, that would be great. So I was beyond excited. He gave me his fee, which was incredibly high. But, I was broke out my spreadsheet, and I'm thinking, I kind of had an idea what other bands on the label were getting for budgets. And I knew that about 80% of our album was being recorded in my house. So I'm thinking, because we can get the recording budget so low, I think we can afford to do them for the art. So I was excited. I called the record company. Nope, immediately shot down. And I'm like, why? I think we can afford it. No, Jag Panzer, cannot spend that much money on an artist. Even if you personally pay for it, you cannot do it. We have a precedence at the label as to what bands get what for art, and bands here that sell a lot more than you don't get that much for art.
Mm.
So it was absolutely off the table to have Keith do the album cover for Thing to the Throne, which was just completely deflated me. I absolutely love his art, and he really wanted to do it. And he's dead now.
Mm.
And it was, but that's the music business. Anytime something happens like that, I try to, even though I may be angry about it, I try to also look at it from the other point of view. So I can see it from the record company's point of view. Any band that's well managed and sells a lot more than us, they probably knew who Keith Parkinson was. They probably knew how much he charged. So I imagine if we had one of his covers, the record company would have been getting a lot of angry calls from bigger bands than us. So why does Jag Panzer get his artwork? So I do understand it, but it was sort of a brutal wake-up call to the way the music business works.
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, if you're looking at it from a silver lining point of view, it does make a good story. So you got something out of it. Wow. Touching on Thane to the Throne, I'll and I'm looking at the time, so we'll wrap it up in a tick. But I'll have to mention, because I just never thought about it until you started talking about that album. King at a Price was the first song that I ever heard, and
cool.
I was me and a friend of mine in high school we're at the end of towards the end of high school, but we were sort of just starting to really sort of dig into metal that was more than your big four and whatever was mainstream, and just suddenly open up a world of what we thought at the time was European metal. We thought you guys was from somewhere in the depths of Europe, and then eventually we found the album itself in a store. And we bought it. We bought one copy between the two of us, and we just kept swapping it back and forth. But King at a Price was the first song that we actually heard, and I think I found it online, and then that led to us finding the CD in a store, and it was you guys, and I think it must have just been, because was Thane to the Throne the first one on Century Media, or was there one before that?
It was the third on Century Media. Fourth Judgment and Age of Mastery were before it.
Ah, right. Okay. So I mean, maybe it was just it was a bit of a Century Media time, because I guess, you know, there was a bit of distribution there. But I think it was you guys and Iced Earth, and there's a couple of other bands at the time, and it was just, our eyes just got opened up for this amazing world of metal. And I think it went from, you know, liking a few songs from a few different bands here and there, and sort of just being a bit of a casual listener and just being more interested in other things in life, to becoming absolutely diehard and this, you know, enthusiast of music, and just wanting, and not being able to stop, like just wanting to discover more and more and more. So, you know, eventually, not, you know, a little while later, and connecting with you through the old Metal Rules forums back in the day, and then we had a brief encounter. Oh, it must have been 2005 or something like that, over at Bang Your Head, and just, you know, everything since then. It's amazing to see, you know, at least from my point of view, my journey with metal music, and seeing all that, and then having a chat to you now. It's a bit of a surreal moment, because and I didn't even think about it before giving you a call today, because I was just, I'm looking at everything else that you've been involved with over the years, and then just when you mentioned that album name, I thought, oh wow, there you go, it's come full circle.
Yeah, it was a fun album to do. I mean, everybody was really, really focused on that record in supporting the Macbeth story. We approached it like a soundtrack, and like, you know, the whole idea with us, and everybody was on board, is like, look, the important thing about this is Shakespeare's story. I mean, this is a classic story, so we really need to do it justice with a metal soundtrack. So it was great seeing everybody absolutely on board with that idea.
It's one of those albums that you sort of look back on, and I guess it's like anything. It's you know, albums that you listen to in defining periods of your life. You know, I'm sure you've got a whole bunch of albums and bands that you listen to sort of in earlier years, where you'll get taken back. It's like a time machine. And when I hear certain songs or albums, and that album is one where I sort of just get thrown back into a completely different time in my life. But it's I look back really fondly, and it's some great feelings when I listen to that album, and a lot of music from around that period of time. So it's yeah, I'll say it right now. Thank you very much for helping me sort of fall into this rabbit hole of metal.
Glad to hear it. Thank you. It's cool. Funny, with Thane was the first album we started joking in the band about, the Jag Panzer curse. That's what we call when we come out with an album and it gets released, and a lot of people are like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's okay. And then about 6 years later, oh man, that album's great.
Oh, well, I guess in years gone by now, and sort of, you know, me getting into music and playing in bands and releasing albums. I mean, I've seen that firsthand now. You release an album, and for us, we had, you know, we changed the name of our band in 2005 and went from Dungeon to Lord, and we're the same. We are the same band. We just changed our name. So we play all the first era of the band. We consistently do that, but there's a stigma attached to the first band or the first name, where people always gravitate towards that band is always better than what we are now. And so we had a lot of trouble releasing stuff under Lord to begin with, because we had to win over the crowd that were purists for Dungeon, and that was fine, and we had a bit of a strategy in place. But then we put out the album, and, you know, we got the mixed reviews, and it was a little bit lukewarm, and some people liked it, some people, you know, weren't terribly interested. And then you'd release the next one under Lord, and then they would turn around and say, well, this one's not that good, but your last one, that was way better. And then, and now, you know, what are we? Probably, 13 years in with Lord. Now there's so many people that don't even look back on Dungeon, and we put out an album or put out a release now, and people will completely disregard what we're putting out now. But the one that we put out, that first Lord album that everyone disregarded back then, they talk about how amazing that album was, and how, you know, you'll never be able to touch that one, and that was the best thing that you ever did for both Lord and Dungeon. And you sit there and you scratch your head and you go, you can't win.
Yeah, we feel exactly the same way. It's funny, when Apple came out, you know, people now tell me, I hear from people that say, oh, Ample's an 80s metal classic. And I always appreciate hearing that. But I have to remind people that when it came out, the biggest magazines like Metal Forces, they gave it an 8 out of 10. I think they reviewed 30 bands that month. And if they would have put them in a chart, we'd be like number 21 out of 30.
It's I think age does an interesting thing to music, and I guess there's an element of nostalgia that comes from music when people listen to it at particular times in their life. And so when you hear a song or an album that was from years ago, then you tend to, depending on what you link it to, you can look back on it more and more fondly as the years go by. So I guess it's a bit of a perception thing that can work in favor for a lot of bands, but it can go the other way for others.
Yeah. I couldn't even give Ample Destruction away back then. I tried, because our deal was only for the U.S. and the label was very cool. I mean, it'd always remind me, look, you can sell it to Europe, and maybe you guys can get some money. And I couldn't even. Europe didn't even want it for free back then. I mean, it was so weird.
Oh man, and and I'm sure, like, those copies that you couldn't even give away at the time, I'm sure that people would be snapping them up now if they were able to get their hands on them.
Well, it was more the license I was trying to sell, and not the. Yeah, I was trying to. I would hit up Neat Records, Metal, Music for Nations, and all the various labels in Europe at the time, and just no interest.
Well, look, I mean, I guess, once again, the silver lining of the situation, at least, you're in a position now where people look back fondly and keep hassling you or harassing you to do a part 2.
You never could do a part 2. The funny thing is, I know every song on Ample Destruction inside and out. I mean, I could sit there and go, okay, if I do the riff this way and change this chord and do this, it would be, I could make it different enough to release. I mean, I would never do that. But even if I did that, I don't think people would say, oh, that sounds like Ample. I mean, no. You're just never going to get that sound again.
That's it. You'll just never be able to. It's more than just the song itself. It's everything that's in context with it. And a lot of bands have attempted to go back to their roots and release a part 2 of something, and it's a rehashed, version, and it never strikes. It never hits that chord. And so I think some things are best left in the legacy of the band, and that's where you guys were at the time, and it's celebrated. And I think it's amazing that you've got albums that many people look back on and are quite fond of and talk in high regard, and put it in high regard with a lot of other classic metal albums. So it's a good position to be in. Yeah. I wouldn't even try to duplicate Ample. I mean, it's just leave it the way it is. That was, a slice of time as to, how we were back then and how we sounded. And I always think an album should always move a band forward. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I will put some links in the show notes for the episode for, Jag Panzer, but of course the Deviant Chord as well. So if people want to check out the latest album, they can go and have a squiz of that, and I'll put all the links to yourself and the band in there as well. But thanks so much, Mark. I really appreciate it. It's great to reconnect as well. Yeah, thank you, Andy. This was fun.
Thanks, everyone. If you want to check out Jag Panzer's brand new album, The Deviant Chord, which came out in 2017, you can go to jagpanzer.com and click on the links to purchase the album. I'm sure most online metal retailers will have the album available for sale, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. They've got some pretty good distro happening. If you want to learn more about Mark or Jag Panzer, I've got all the links over in the show notes over at andysocial.net. As with every episode of the Andy Social podcast, it's actually, in my biased opinion, a fantastic resource to really get to know the guests that have been on this podcast and find opportunities to further support them as well. So get on over to andysocial.net and check all of that out. As mentioned at the beginning of the episode, for anybody that's planning to go the upcoming Dragonland National Tour that's happening in September and wants one of those exclusive laminates that are signed by the band. Only 25 of them are available. You can email Stu from Stormrider Touring by emailing stormriderfestival@live.com.au with a proof of purchase of your ticket. And if there are any left, then you can grab one from Stu. There are only 25, so I expect them to go fairly quickly. If you want to get tickets, you can go to stormridertouring.com.au/tickets. And that's it, folks. That is the end of another episode. Thank you so much for the support. I'm starting to batch record all of these well in advance. TY is going off on some gallivanting adventure through Europe for 6 weeks, so I have a lot of work to do. So this is being recorded a little bit in advance, but you can go and support the podcast by all the usual ways, leaving reviews all over the place. I do have patches now. They've been up for a few weeks as of the time this podcast goes to air. So if you want to grab a Antisocial patch, you can go over to antisocial.net and click on the merchandise or store link or buy stuff page or whatever it is. I can't remember. You can go over there. There's t-shirts, there's USB passes, there's patches. You can also go to lord.net.au, buy CDs, t-shirts, hoodies, patches as well. There's heaps of ways to support me and the podcast and the band as well. So anyway, enough. Until next week, guys, thank you very much for the support. Keep sharing these episodes around, and thank you so much for the new listeners that are tuning in. I do waffle a bit in these outros, but hopefully you get something out of it. All right, folks, take care, and until next week, ta-ta.